So Ford has just released the 2020 Shelby GT500 into the world. But did you know that Shelby Mustangs have been around since 1965? What do you know about the 1965 GT350? Well, step into the lounge and let's talk about the 1965 Shelby GT350. So with all the talk of Shelby Mustangs, I think it was a good time to go back into history and let's talk about the very first Shelby Mustang that hit the streets, the 1965 Shelby GT350. A lot of people thought that it was a little too harsh when it was released, that it was too loud, that it didn't have enough comfort, didn't have enough creature comforts for the people, but then there are people who just loved this car. So we're going to take a look at this car, but before we get into it, be sure and subscribe and don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time we release a new video. Alright, so let's jump into the 1965 Shelby GT350. Let's face it, cars come and cars go, and some leave a larger impact than others. However, none have left quite the impact on the automotive world than the Shelby Mustang. Of all the iconic cars ever made, the Shelby Mustang ranks among the most popular, most recognized, and most emulated car on the road today. When the first GT350 hit the streets in 1965, there was nothing like it. From the Le Mans stripes that ran from front to rear to the rumbling side pipes, it was the epitome of a GT racer. A car that was light and agile, wrapped up in tons of attitude. The driving force behind such an iconic vehicle? That would be the man, the legend, Carroll Shelby. The man responsible for the Cobra, GT40, Viper, and Series 1. So the GT350 is in good company. So who was Carroll Shelby? Well, we all know the basics, right? I mean, born in 1923, grew up in Texas, was a flight instructor in World War II, stole a plane to bomb his girlfriend's house with love letters, got married after the war, had kids, owned a chicken farm, raced cars, retired due to a heart condition, built the Cobra, GT40, won Le Mans, and was asked by then Ford President Lee Iacocca to make the Secretary Car Mustang into a way more interesting race car. Now everyone's all caught up. So in 1964, Ford introduced the world to the 1965 Ford Mustang. Even though the Mustang was touted as a car for secretaries, Iacocca saw much more potential in it and wanted to go racing with it in SCCA B-Production. He turned to the one man who already had a proven record racing Ford-powered vehicles and was already dominating the A-Production class with his Cobra, and that man was Carroll Shelby. Although he was reluctant at first, Shelby eventually came on board with the idea and decided to help Iacocca beat up on Corvettes in B-Production the same way he and his Cobras beat up on Corvettes in A-Production. With the chassis based on the Falcon platform, Shelby had his work cut out for him. Upon hearing Iacocca asking him to make the Mustang into a sports car, Shelby replied with, "Lee, you can't make a race car out of a mule." But after a bit of convincing, it was time to go to work. Ford supplied Shelby with the Mustangs he needed. They were Wimbledon white 65 Mustang fastbacks, delivered minus hoods, grills, rear seats, exhaust systems, and emblems. However, they were equipped with a K-code, solid lifter cammed, 289 hypo engine, Kelsey Hayes front disc brakes with metallic pads, a Borg-Warner close ratio 4-speed, a 9-inch rear end with station wagon drum brakes, and a Detroit Locker rear diff with 389 gears. Now, in order to qualify for B-Production racing, the car had to be a 2-seat production car with either an unmodified engine or unmodified suspension. Shelby chose to stick with the unmodified suspension and to modify the engine. To that end, the 271 horsepower 289 was topped with an aluminum intake and a 715 CFM Holley carburetor with the Le Mans center pivot floats. The cast iron hypo exhaust manifolds were replaced with full-length tri-wide headers that flowed into a pair of glass pack mufflers and exited to the side in front of the back wheel. The engine combination was good for an overall output of 306 horsepower. The suspension needed to be left stock, but could be enhanced up to a point. To be blunt, the Mustang suspension left a lot to be desired in the handling department and required more than just a pair of stiff shocks if it was going to compete against the world. Up front, Shelby swapped out the stock front springs for 600-pound coils, then took the upper control arms and lowered the mounting point by 1 inch. This changed the suspension geometry and kept the tire tread in full contact with the road as the suspension loaded and unloaded. The stock 7/8 inch sway bar was replaced with a thicker 1-inch diameter unit, and the chassis was strengthened by installing an export brace and Monte Carlo bar between the shock towers. New idler and longer pitman arms quickened the steering from 21-to-1 to 19-to-1. Out back, a pair of links were welded to the top of the axle tubes on the rear end and anchored to the chassis, a method used to keep the rear tires firmly planted on the ground during hard acceleration. The entire suspension rode on Coney shocks on all 4 corners, and the battery was relocated to the trunk for better weight distribution, but was moved back to the engine compartment mid-year. For the interior, it was mainly all Mustang. However, it had to be made into a 2-seater, so the rear seat was removed and replaced with a fiberglass package tray to mount the spare tire. The slide rule speedometer and idiot lights were retained, but enhanced with a tachometer and oil pressure gauge mounted in a pod to the center of the dash pad. The factory Mustang steering wheel was upgraded to a real wood grain 3-spoke GT style wheel with the Cobra logo as the center cap. The horn itself was a toggle switch on the dash. It's the exterior that catches everyone's eye. In 1965, every GT350 came in Wimbledon white with optional Guardsman blue stripes. All of the Mustang emblems were removed except for the gas cap and a small, unassuming running horse attached to the right side of the grille. To the rear, most cars receive a rectangular GT350 emblem on the rear panel next to the right side tail light. The factory hood was upgraded to a fiberglass version of the Mustang hood with a low-profile hood scoop. Since the hood was made of fiberglass, the hood hinge springs were removed to keep the hood from bowing, and the latching mechanism was replaced with hood pins. The rocker panels received a Guardsman glue triple stripe with the name GT350 etched up near the front wheel. Finally, the car was finished off with either a set of 15 by 5.5 plain steel wheels or 15 by 6-inch wheels made especially for Shelby by Krager. Each Shelby was given a special production badge that was riveted over the Ford VIN location. When asked how the car got its name, the rumor is that Shelby asked engineer Phil Remington what the distance between the race and production shops at Shelby American was. Remington's response was, about 350 feet. To which Shelby said, that's what we'll call it, the GT350. But that was the street version, which is actually a detuned version of the GT350R. As hardcore as the 65 GT350 was, the GT350R was all that turned up about 10 notches. With the R standing for race, Shelby built 34 of these special models to compete in SCCA B-Production. Imagine your standard GT350. Strip out anything unnecessary from the interior to lighten things up, which wasn't much. Replace the slide rule speedometer with a full complement of gauges to relay the engine's vitals. Remove the side louvers and block them off with a plate of sheet metal. Replace the rear window with a plexiglass unit, especially formed to create an opening designed to vent air from the interior, reducing the pressure inside and increasing the top speed of the car. The front bumper and apron were replaced with a special R model version that increased air into the radiator while accommodating a front-mounted oil cooler. Additional vents were for ducting air to the front brake rotors. The heavy door glass, vent window, and crank mechanism were replaced with a lighter plexiglass window and aluminum frame. The door glass would be raised and lowered using a leather strap. Under the hood, the 289 high-performance engine remained the same, but was fully blueprinted, producing horsepower in the 340 to 360 range. Everything suspension-wise remained the same, with the only modification being the addition of 15 by 7 American Racing magnesium wheels wrapped in a set of Goodyear Blue Streak tires. The chassis was stiffened up with a roll cage and a racing seat installed. The final touch was the fuel tank. They took 2 stock fuel tanks, cut off the tops, and welded them together to form a 34-gallon reservoir. The end result was a car that absolutely dominated the B-Production class from 1965 through 1967. In order to make the GT350R legal for racing, the rules stated that at least 100 street units needed to be produced. Shelby built a total of 562 units. On the road, the GT350 was a pony car with an attitude that could rival the local muscle at the time. They were extremely popular with racing enthusiasts, but unfortunately fell out of favor during the 1970s due to the fuel crisis. Back then, they could be had for a few $100, but still, a Shelby Mustang never lost its flavor. They were the rawest production car Shelby ever built, next to the Ford 27 Cobra SC. In the 1980s, they began to pick up in popularity and value. Their contribution to the automotive world was significant and was finally being recognized. Many cars survived the years, some better than others, but are highly sought after in practically any condition. In today's market of 2019, a 65 GT350 can fetch 6 figures, while a well-documented R mile can go for close to 7 figures easily. While Shelby continued to build Mustangs up until 1970, the 1965 remains to be the purest form of GT car ever built by Shelby American. They were loud, rough, fast, and continue to bring a devilish grin to whoever cracked the throttle on one. There may be plenty of imitators, but they're only trying to capture the magic created by the first Shelby GT350. Thanks for stopping by the Gearhead Lounge to check out our video on the 1965 Shelby GT350. Be sure and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell so that you're notified each time we upload a video. Stay tuned because we're working on a new video for the 1966 Shelby GT350, which will be coming soon. So thanks again for stopping by. We'll talk to you later. Take care.